Welcome to the Startup Defense. My name is Callye Keen. Word of warning about this week's episode, my audio was off and I apologize. I apologize to you, the listener. Bear with me, and I apologize to my guest. But this episode with Sean is so good, and I love what Sean is doing and his story so much. I have to get this episode out here. So again, bear with me. I apologize, but listen to this very special episode. Thank you.
And so we went and built it. Myself, Zach, and my grandmother in Richmond, we worked in her garage actually to build this first prototype. We had an initial one that was like a 1/5 scale model of it that we built out of 1/2-inch duct tape, staples, and 550 cords.
Welcome to the Startup Defense. Today I have my friend Sean Matson. Sean, what is up?
Good, man. How are you doing? Good to see you again.
Very good. Very good. For our audience, can you tell us who is Sean Matson? What are you up to? What are you passionate about?
Yeah, so Sean Matson grew up in Richmond, Virginia originally, went to school out in Lexington, Virginia at Virginia Military Institute, swam there, and then spent 13 years as a SEAL officer. So from 2005 to 2018, did 5 deployments during that time. Also kind of during that time that I was active, my business partner and I started Matbock, which Matbock, it's part of my last name, part of his last name. We started it really in 2006 with this idea of how to make a new cargo net system for the military, which has been our worst product to date. I think we may have sold 2 of them. I think we gave 1 away. But what it did do is it helped set the foundation to us understanding how to get a product to market, get a patent, find manufacturing, do all of this while we were still active and while we had a paying job, and to just kind of get this business going. Officially, we've been in business 13 years. So 2010 is when we actually officially incorporated. We've been at this since 2006.
I've seen you launch a really wide range of products. So I've seen you launch drinks, kind of energy products, and I kind of want to get into that. But I've also seen the Matbock products, including backpacks and wearables, which really gets into the space where I mix in the electronics and manpack stuff. So kind of really piques my interest. But in general, there's got to be a through line here, is because you're picking these ideas and then bringing them to market. And I know you kind of mentioned the net's your worst selling product, but how is that kind of development or business development or personal development process been of like honing, taking an idea and then bringing it into the market as something to innovate defense problem?
We have always looked at ourselves as a tech development company. At the end of the day, we do have kind of soft goods with, like you mentioned, backpacks or plate carriers or other things like that. But we have an autofocus night vision goggle accessory that goes on the end of a MVG, which is one of our best selling products. We have electronics that for indirect firing control systems for mortar teams or fire support officers. We have a wide range of things. In fact, we're even working on a electric hybrid JLTV right now for the Army. So we won that contract last year from the Army, and we're developing, their next generation joint light tactical vehicle in a hybrid version of that. Wide spectrum of things. But again, when it comes back down to it, we're a tech development company. We really look at innovation. We look at new materials, new manufacturing process, how to sometimes incorporate both of those in new material and new manufacturing process to ultimately bring a new product to the market. Our primary customer is the government. It's, law enforcement, military, first responders, kind of in that world. You mentioned earlier, launching an energy drink company, right? When we launched that, it was the same exact concept as these others. It was something innovative. We took what historically has been in a can, an energy drink can or something like that, and we took the chemistry that is in the energy drink cans, worked with engineers, reformulated it so that everything could fit in essentially what it was, a ketchup packet that was a liquid. And then the soldier, sailors, Marines could ship all over the world for them, pour into, 20 ounces of water, and then they have their energy drink. Fast forward, now we sold that business about 2.5 years ago or so, and they're still in business. But we saw a little bit more that we wanted to do in that space outside of just energy drinks. So we ended up selling our shares, and we went after the supplement space. And so we created what is called Cardomax now, which is Cardio Maximus is the north-south running road in Roman times where they would build their cities off of. And so it's a center point of what they would build the cities for. But Cardomax is a whole line of supplements. So we have an energy line, we have an immune booster, we have a hydration, a nootropic for focus, we have recovery. So we went down and used all that science and information that we had already developed, but worked and re-engineered some of the products so that we had a full line of supplements.
What I'm taking out of this is when you so as an aside, Sean is a good LinkedIn follow because you are always doing interesting things. And so yeah, I see these tech products which I'm attracted to, and then I see the new drink and the supplement line come out. But abstractly, think of it like this: is you've been trained to see problems and trends. And I was just talking to Trish. She was the coordinator for the deaf community, Defense Entrepreneur Forum. She
Yep.
was just on the show. We were talking about this. This is why I like working with operators, former operators, people that are or were in the IC, is because there's such a training towards see and solve problems and like looking at the data and analytics. And as a product development company, this is why a lot of products fail, because they don't actually solve a problem. They're just an idea that is like untethered from reality. And so it sounds like wildly different things, but in reality, I know that you're looking at the same customer segments of problems, and you have a process for developing a problem solution fit into. There's not really a whole lot process wise the difference between working with a mechanical engineer and working with a formulator. At the end of the day, it's still a process of developing, prototyping, testing, piloting, etc. So for a layperson, it sounds wildly different, but I think from a product development standpoint, innovation is innovation.
Obviously, like you mentioned, I mean, whether you're innovating a new supplement line or like I talked about the JLTV, right? The steps are the same in terms of like the gross macro steps that you have to take to get through that process, right? What is different is all the subtasks and sub components to each of the macro things that have to go in there, right? Like the JLTV has hundreds and hundreds, sometimes thousands of things that have to all go right in a particular step before you can move on to, the next step. Where formulating a hydration product might only have 4 or 5 steps that really have to do, or 4 or 5 subtasks before you have to go into the next step. So the level of complexity and ultimately time varies between those things. But, we do have that process. We do constantly look at things, but then also look at similar to how we would do things in the military. After we finish a mission, the first thing we're doing is we're doing an AAR and an after action review and looking at really subjectively where we screwed up and how we can make things better so that we don't continue to make those same mistakes, but also for the next project, we're trying to get it to those guys that like, hey, listen, like we might need to look at either a different piece of technology that we're using or another way or vendor or something, and I think everybody saw it during COVID, obviously supply chain and different things that went, really stressed the ability to manufacture some of these things, really since the first start of COVID. I mean, even though everything that we do on the Matbock side has to be sourced and manufactured here in the United States, so we don't have to worry about some of the longer logistics lines. Even us, like we went back and we're still really going through a lot of this with some of our vendors just because we haven't found exactly the right fit in some areas, is making sure we double and triple tap some of these places that to make sure that if one vendor goes away, we know that we have the resources to continue to grow and scale. Some of it's part of COVID and other is just the demand. We're hitting too much demand from one vendor that we need to go source this particular item from 2 or 3 vendors that do the same thing.
We're still seeing subcomponents, things like power converters or even smaller power components have really long lead times, especially in particular more niche configurations of that product, which
Yeah.
of course I need the hardest to get version of that product, right? In addition to that, there's finally a big movement to reshore. And, like you, everything that we do is made in the USA because we are a manufacturing company, but now it's getting all to the electronics, it's getting to the optics, it's getting more and more to the software part of it. So the idea of having a software bill of materials that is all overseen domestically, and that's putting a lot of additional stress on the system. You could just buy XYZ component, slap it in there, and get an exception for it, and you really can't do that now. And then in another year or so, you really won't be able to. Something as simple as electronics really holds up that whole system. Going from this COTS to now this blue secure supply chain, I see that as being a big point of contention for product development companies that aren't as good at adapting. What are some other lessons that you've learned as you're building this product development company? I feel like, and this might be speaking out of turn, but with my friends that are entrepreneurs that have come out of the service, it seems like they have better mission focus and that they're able to handle more ambiguity than, say, a startup that's just thinking, hey, we're going to win tomorrow. Or, they
Right.
have that kind of entrepreneur math versus the focus, I'm going to do these things deliberately. If this makes sense, what lessons have you pulled from your experience into this present day experience?
I touched on it briefly, like the cargo net system was what really got everything started. A little bit longer of a story to that was, when we first came up with the idea, it was a flight from San Diego to Alaska, and it was an 8-hour flight on the back of a C-130, and we're sitting there yelling and screaming at each other, coming up with this new cargo net system. The cargo nets have not changed since World War II. The same company that manufactured them back in World War II is still the same design, I guess I should say, is the exact same thing that is still done to this day. It's a large company. You've seen their ratchet straps and buckles basically on the back of every open bed semi truck that's out there. Kennedyne is the name of the company that makes them, but they make the military cargo nets. It's about a $30 to $40 million a year contract for these cargo nets between manufacturing new cargo nets and servicing the old cargo nets. So we were like, hey, we'll just sell this idea to the company. They'll love this new idea that we just came up with, and the rest will be history, right? And we got nothing, like not interested. We started talking to investors to potentially invest in us, and every one of them, because, we're O1s at the time, like fresh out of college, with making decent money for, in the military as an officer and as a SEAL with the special pays and things like that, but not enough money to start this throwing at all these other stuff they're doing. And so we talked about raising money and doing all this other stuff and people investing. And every time we kept going out this way, everyone that we talked to was like, listen, like, it's a great idea. You just need to go build it. Like, you need to go build it, go do it. And so we just were like, fine. Like, we just got tired of hearing the same feedback from other people. And so we went and built it. Myself, Zach, and my grandmother in Richmond, we worked in her garage actually to build this first prototype. We had an initial one that was like a 1/5 scale model of it that we built out of 1/2 inch duct tape, staples, and 550 cord that we made to make us our first like 1/5 scale model. And we developed and built that first like full functioning, full size prototype of it and learned some things from that. Just from building from a 1/5 scale to a full scale, we learned some things that we needed to adjust and do. And my grandma actually came out with this really neat idea to control some of how big this net is. And this cargo net and cargo is 8 feet or so by 8 feet. I mean, it's a huge cube area that you're dealing with and hundreds of pounds of gear that can be stacked on this thing. We came up with this idea and other things and ultimately took it to a manufacturer that did other things in the aerospace area. And, they ultimately picked it up as a product that they were going to OEM for us. So we got pricing on it. We got it up on our website and, sent it off to get the preliminary drawings to file for a provisional patent, finally got a patent. Ultimately, even though like the initial idea of selling this idea and making money off of that didn't turn into anything, then the next thing is, well, we'll just make it and then we'll start selling it. Really, 13 years later, still hasn't turned into anything. But what it has done, right? And this is where I think when you talk about startups really just losing some of that focus or just keep going back, what that did do is that paved an incredible roadmap and path for us that I can now get a product from inception to, basically production ready in weeks, where before it was taking years, and figuring out like, oh, who do I talk to for maybe this part of it, or cost modeling and prototyping cost, and just all these things that at the beginning you're just like, oh gosh, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. Well, now it's like you've got these things where you just got formulas. You can just plug in some numbers and you can get your information spit out to you in matters of seconds sometimes. And so it's created that roadmap, but it is also that process to get those products to market. And we never let that stop us from thinking, what we were building with Matbock in terms of an innovative tech development company. That foundation was needed in the defense space. And now again, you fast forward 13 years and we absolutely see where ideas and things that we were talking about back in 2007, 8 time frame, when we were really starting to kind of like, oh, maybe we should start a company and talk about, but we're like, well, what do we want it to be? And we were like, we want to be different than everybody else. We don't want to do what everybody else is doing because there's 30 companies making the same plate carrier. So let's not do that. Let's figure out our own path and really push innovation in that. And now, again, when you look at what's kind of happened to the defense industry, a lot of those companies are gone. The demand's not there for, 30 companies making the same plate carrier. They've whittled it down. They've got a few companies making that plate carrier now, but they're spending a lot more money on R&D and looking for companies to really innovate and push those technologies. And that's where we're really picking up some steam on others where it wasn't typically there before.
There's so much in product development on the other side of product development, getting something to market that you really can't know or you can't really be taught without doing it. So I like that story because the things that you make now are technically complicated. They are technical products, or we say hard tech innovations, right? They're not something that you can just buy and slap a coat of paint on. They're not something you could sew or 3D print and just be done with it. They're complex and have complex development associated with it. So you have to understand the process and how to get customer buy-in and test things and have a validated idea. But I could tell somebody this a million times, but until they actually start making things, it's hard to relay. I mean, I love that story because so like people ask me how I got started in developing products, and one I grew up in a machine shop, so this is like that's one piece. But I started developing products by like making little things for like history fair and science fair, or like professionally by reverse engineering so we could make 10 more of a thing, just measuring it, and really, really straightforward because there's so much even in doing something simple that you don't know. It's like you have to have some basis of out there to play into because that process, whatever discipline that you can put into that process, it scales up, right? We want to do cool stuff, but it's like there's a lot of boring stuff that facilitates making really cool stuff. What's on the horizon for Matbock?
The biggest thing right now for us at Matbock is the JLTV. That is really interesting where we're going with that. We've got a lot of really cool tech in there to not only help write some of the military history side of things, but I also think that it's going to also translate into the civilian sector. Unfortunately, I can't get into details of some of it. Part of it is because the contract that we're on with the Army on it. When we looked at this again as a problem, and when we competed against, I mean, we competed against Northrop Grumman, Lockheed, Boeing, all the big defense companies in this space that are 1,000x times bigger than we are when it comes to scale and funding and everything else. But ultimately, we won because we were the most aggressive with our proposal. While we're not going to hit necessarily the moon, or we say we're not going to hit Mars on this first one, we're going to fall a little short and we're going to hit the moon. And so, it's like, hey, I mean, we are absolutely pushing huge technology leaps with what we're putting together. And it's exciting to watch it all start to come together now that we're in the build phase and we're starting to finish up, getting into the integration phase and pushing through these last 6 months of the year, to get this contract completed.
I love that. I'll speak for myself, but this is something I repeat like a mantra over and over again. We're too small to make bad products. if I was a massive company, I'm a safe bet, right? I can
Yeah.
make something that's incrementally better. They're going to look at my resources, my team, my track record, and say, you know what? No one ever got fired for picking NGC or for picking Lockheed. Like, that's a good
Yeah.
bet. They can right the ship if something goes a little off the kilter. So I can't compete by making good products. I have to make something that's bizarrely better. So, like I said, I'm speaking for myself, but I feel like you're coming from that same space. It's like we have to be absurdly better or have incredibly high value proposition.
And honestly, that's where Zach's a mechanical engineer. I was a civil engineer. So both of us have that just mindset of constantly, oh, I could fix this or I could do this or, make this better. And, what's the next mousetrap? Oh yeah, let's make that, a little bit better. Zach was really instrumental in getting that concept kind of really flushed out in his head and kind of letting us know what his thought was on it. And then really convincing, the army that this was a viable option, against a lot of, I think people looking at it are just like, listen, like we hear you. However, no one else is doing that, like not even close to what you guys are proposing. So what makes you think, kind of like to your point, like what makes you think you could do it? And it's like, well, I mean, watch us, So the army and their entire team that we're working with on this, they've been phenomenal throughout this entire process with us. Again, whenever you're doing innovation, does every step happen 100% correct the first time? And so we've had to make some audibles, we've had to make some adjustments, but ultimately we've been completely transparent with everybody on it. Maybe sometimes maybe too much transparency. To us, it's like, that's what you have to do though. When you're doing these things like this, because, the worst thing you want to happen is like it get down to turning it over and they're like, wait a minute, why was this one cable not this that you said it was going to be? And it's like, oh yeah, we made this little change. We thought it would be no issue. It's like, that's kind of a big issue, And so anyway, you completely understand. It's just like, you gotta over communicate. You got to, when you're in these situations where, one, you're faced against a huge leap in innovation, but also a time crunch in that we're given right now 18 months, basically from the time the contract was awarded to fully turn this thing around. And I mean, on day one, when we got the JLTV, it was like rip everything out of the engine, transmission, everything is just like, and start. We're doing it from, basically not the ground up, but basically the entire drivetrain part of it is completely getting redone. And so, I mean, it's just a massive overhaul when it comes to this and trying to get all the integration going. But it's also very exciting because I think here in the next few weeks, we're hoping to be able to put out another press release kind of on our progress. I'll make sure it's exciting to see where some of this technology could potentially be going here in the near future.
I like that you said that not everything goes according to plan, because this is a big misunderstanding with startups and innovation, is that they're gonna work with you, they're gonna work with me, they're gonna work with somebody, and it's just execute. Like, why should it go right? It's never existed. No one's ever done it. Why would it go correctly the first time? It's intuitive after you've done it a number of times that that's impossible, but it's a common disappointment that people have in innovation, is that it doesn't magically work out perfect the first time. Kind of makes me think about jets flying, but it's like a whole nother level of technical innovation. I work with people on those teams. It's amazing the level of due diligence that goes in, but still it's amazing that a plane flies. It's fairly binary when it doesn't fly, and yet it does. I've met innumerable people that want to do what you're doing. They're coming out of the service or they're coming out of school and they want to start innovation company. They want to go down that. And part of what we're trying to tackle on this show is get them to see the opportunities and the problems that are over in this DoD or federal space, right? So that might be LEO, it might be disaster recovery, it might be humanitarian aid, but it might be intelligence community, DoD. But to cluster it into one pot is to look at non-traditional source problems and new market. But the issue that startups have, or somebody coming out of college, is this looks like the most absurdly difficult to enter industry that there is. It really isn't. but can you give some lessons learned about how to get in, find those opportunities, get in front of customers?
So going back to first thing is like, and like you, right, talk to different people all the time, and it was like, I got this great idea. So like one of our first benchmarks to work with someone is they have to they have to make a prototype. If they're not willing to invest time in making a prototype, then I want nothing to do with this person. If it's just an idea that they've got in their head, I don't have time for it. And I tell them like, hey, listen, I don't care if you make this out of cardboard, duct tape, if it's an app, right? Build the flow of what the app looks like on a PowerPoint. I don't care, but I have to see you've actually put some thought into this rather than you just blabber on a paragraph after paragraph about this idea. And then you want me and my team to go build this thing for you. It's like, no. So we always require anybody that we work with to build a prototype. And again, I don't care if it's made out of cardboard, duct tape, staples. I want to see whatever is in your idea in your head come to fruition. And so that's step one. And right there, you weed out like 90% of the people because they won't even do that. I think that's just a testament that their stomach's not there and they're not cut out to go do this. If they do come back with said prototype, then I'm willing to work with them and move forward and help them, go down that road. But at least they've taken the time to invest into taking their idea, make it turn into something. And now I know that they're committed to seeing this actually come to make it into a full-on product eventually. I know you've made hundreds, thousands of different prototypes before. Not every one of them are pretty. Sometimes it literally is like stupid simple, like you're just taking a piece of paper and you're crumpling it up, making some things. And you're like, oh, that's all we have to do. The autofocus night vision goggle accessory that we did, we couldn't find what we needed to do. And we kept trying to make it work. And then all of a sudden this was years ago before Amazon was as big as they are now. I saw a pasta measuring device, which was an iris that opened and closed. I bought it for like $4 and some change. I put it on the end of my night vision goggles and I was like, it works. This is exactly what we wanted to do. Like, this works. It actually does, do what it needs to do. Again, it was just like, it's such a dumb idea, but it solved what I needed to do. It created, that idea because I couldn't get the 3D models to work the way we wanted to do. I couldn't get the precision that you need to make some of the fins. It was going to cost us way more money than we had to invest in that to get that product. And I was like, look, this thing's $5. At the end of the day, startup, first thing you have to do is you have to start. You have to start somewhere. You have to start moving in that path. And so again, for us, it's give me a prototype. I don't care how ugly the prototype is. Give me something to look at. From there, it's slowly building out kind of what you mentioned, like that problem statement. You're looking at like the customers that you want to go after, who you think this product, really appeals to and things like that. And then getting the product to market. I think the next phase that I see a lot of people fail at is they think, well, I have to have $100 million to go start this company. And then they go raise capital and lose half their company, or they raise a whole bunch of capital and they are really stupid with the money. And then they're broke after 18 months of they just blew $10 million of someone else's money. And they really don't even have a company yet. They still got this product that they haven't been able to sell. And so I've always been a proponent that you can always bootstrap any business to some level, right? You might only last 8 months or a year, but at the end of the day, if you're using your own money in your pocket, you can start a business, register, get an LLC, get a website, get some of these things, learn how to do different things. Like I taught myself how to do some basic photo editing and video editing and, some of these things on the internet that are free. I learned how to build a website, both Matbock and Cardomax. I built those websites at the beginning. Now there are certain features that I didn't know how to do. So I know enough about the back ends of how those websites work that I can hire a guru for a couple $100 and they can make the functions do the last little bit of things that I, might want them to do for a particular product or collection or something. But I've been on there enough to know how to kind of talk some of that language and say, hey, like, I'm not getting this to happen. I need this to be here and have them. And then you're not spending $10,000 for someone to build a website because you just tell a guy, hey, I want to start this new business, got this idea, got this great product. I need a website. He's like, it's going to be $10,000 because you have no idea what you're going to do. He's already thinking in his head, I'm going to have to help this guy figure out his logo. I'm going to have to help the color schemes. I'm going to have the type font. I'm going to have all these things that go in that you haven't even thought about. And that's why he charges you the ridiculous amount of money to build a website when you could do it for free for 7 days on Shopify, get a free trial, and you could build the website in less than a couple hours and have, even to the point where you're taking orders in less than a couple hours, very easily have a couple pages on a website and done. And it costs you, again, maybe a couple hours of your time to do. First one is prototype, that commitment of actually seeing product. And then I think the next thing is just wasting money on just kind of dumb things because they're not willing, again, to invest some of their own time and effort into learning some of these things, to do some of this themselves. And then they just waste money on, I mentioned the website. Another one that I see is, I got to trademark and patent all this stuff. And it's like, hey man, I hate to break it to you, but you're a startup. Nobody cares about your little widget or your little trademark name that you're going to do. So because you just wasted another $10,000, that could have been $10,000 that you just put towards making your product better and turning it into more sales. So those would be my two biggest things that I always see at the beginning with people.
Really similar root cause too, right? If somebody has that skin in the game, why do I have to fill in the belief that they don't have, right? The website is a great, I call that conversationally competent, right? I want to be conversationally competent about something, then I can hire somebody, have them on my team, but I can communicate, oh, this is what I want, this is how we did it before, this is what I've seen, what works and doesn't work, some foundation for expertise to live on. But the prototype's the same. I'll be honest, I ask people to send me a pitch deck. And I say, hey, here's a template for a pitch deck because I don't want a science fair project. I don't want a big write-up. I want 10 slides that cover these basic topics. Run accelerators for 6 years. Yep. So I know that we've had 12-year-olds in these programs. I've had professors, which are the worst. I've had them have good outcomes, right? And so somebody has an idea, I say, hey, just give me an hour and just fill out this pitch deck template so I understand what the opportunity is. Like, who's your customer going to be? Do you have access to that customer? And if not, like, that's the problem that I have to solve with you, not like, can you make this thing? Because the answer, can you make this thing? Unless it goes against the laws of nature, the answer is yes. Like, I can for sure. It's just like, can you afford for it to be made? Is it going to be profitable? Yeah, if somebody took the extra time to build a duct tape prototype or rip something apart and glue a pasta strainer or pasta measuring thing on some goggles, I think we would get a lot farther in that conversation.
Whenever I hear pitch deck, the first thing that always pops in my head is 10, 20, 30. So no more than 10 slides, no less than 20, size 20 font. And the deck should take you about 30 minutes to brief it, to give yourself about 30 minutes for question and answer time.
That's the exact template that we actually use in most of the accelerators, because I can say, hey, here's this other guy, much more successful than me, and he says use big fonts and don't put a bunch of words on the page, right? And because I don't need that. Sean, thank you so much for being on the show. It's great to catch up with you. I know you're busy and you're always planning the next thing, so maybe we'll have you come back on the show when you have more to disclose. But for people that are listening, he is a good LinkedIn follow because they're making cool products and you always see it getting out there. And I know so many people that want to develop the kind of business that you have. So if you're thinking about getting into the innovation business, follow Sean. He's a good example of coming out of the service, having ideas, and then developing that process and bringing products to market. So a really good example.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time and good catching up again. It's been a while since the Clubhouse days, so
Clubhouse is over, I guess. But a good takeaway is early on, I met so many great people and built some really, really fantastic relationships. And there's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah. Actually, last weekend, I was down in Florida and I met Magda, who was in a lot of our channels and stuff like that, another veteran entrepreneur. So it was really funny. Like, we're walking into this conference. I was like, hey, I know you. It was like, holy cow, what are you doing down here? So it's just, small world. Cool, man. Well, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Sean. This has been the Startup Defense.